Hello and welcome back to the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. We have just got done with an incredible Night of Champions, and we are here, of course, for the instant reaction review. As you see, I'm here once again. My name is Scott. I'm joined by Lucas, and in a moment, we're going to be joined by a special guest as well. We're going to be going through all the big stories that came out of quite a newsworthy PLE from Saudi Arabia. So we'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. On this channel, we bring you some great content from inside and outside of the squared circle. We will go through and offer some in-depth analysis of the biggest events of the year, as well as bringing you exclusive interviews with some of the industry's biggest names. There will also be live show reviews, in-depth features, and podcasts. So make sure you give that subscribe button a slam so you don't miss any of the action.
All right, yeah, don't miss the action on this channel, but don't miss the action within WWE, because we saw a lot of it tonight. Of course, we've been with you all night. We had the build-up show earlier on. Thank you to everyone that joined us. Then we had our watch-along. Thank you to everyone that joined us. And now we've got the instant reaction. Appreciate everyone that's joined us here as well. But basically, of course, we've talked about the show as these things happened. If you do want to kind of see my kind of, I guess, more of an instant reaction, go back and check out some of the kind of highlights of that watch along. But what we're here to do now is to kind of give our kind of first take, really, now that the dust is slowly started to settle, but not quite as our regular recap and review would be. We are kind of just giving our kind of instant thoughts straight away after the PLE has ended. And like I said, it's been a very newsworthy event as well. And when you're talking newsworthy stuff, you can expect to bring in exciting special guests as well. And we're going to do that now in Andy Spoors joining us once again. Andy, how you doing, mate?
Good, mate. That's a solid intro, by the way. I feel the pressure now to deliver. How's it going?
You always do. Don't feel pressure, mate. You always do.
Oh, nice to meet you as well, Lucas. I think it's the first time we've actually been on a call
together.
Yeah,
it is.
There we go.
It's a good time to do it, though. The Saudi events, obviously, enjoyable times for us here in the UK, is that the event finishes about 9 o'clock, which is much nicer than the 4 or 5 a.m. finishes that we've had to endure for many a year. But yeah, I mean, I guess we may as well get right into it. Like, the main talking point is going to be the ending of the pay-per-view. Yeah. Obviously, Bloodline imploding. And I mean, Michael Cole asked it as a question, but I think it's safe to say, like, when you super kick the head of the table, you know, there's no, like, will they, won't they? Like, no, the Bloodline have completely imploded.
This is it. Yeah.
In Saudi Arabia, as part of that tag team main event. And you know, it seemed very much, and the Usos were saying, we're the ones, and that's something which obviously you harpen back to their feud with the New Day, way back when, I think 2017 that's kind of how they became this version of the Usos. So they're adamant, it seems, to go back to that, and it seems that definitely now the Bloodline is surely like, that's it. I mean, they might try and do another segment or something. What that segment that, like, like Family Court or something, with them. But I think it's done now. Like, surely the next time we see the Usos, they are not going to be with Roman Reigns or the Bloodline. Like, surely.
Yeah, I mean, it feels that way, that they're going to have to be actively against them. And as I touched on throughout the watch along and the build up, we do have that 1,000-day thing. And it does remind me, as like you said there, the kind of Sami Zayn kind of Raw 30th anniversary thing they did, where they were like the trial of Sami Zayn. I feel like unless we kind of hook the Usos back into the Bloodline by doing something like that, this has got to be the end. And this is what I'm most surprised about, because I thought they were going to cost them, but I didn't think they was going to do it on purpose. And that's not the way it started. They came out there to help Roman and Solo, but it didn't quite work out that way. Andy, what are you thinking about the way it went down, mate? Are you shocked as I am, as far as it was kind of an intentional thing in the end?
Yeah, to an extent. I think it was when I was watching it there, my wife was sat next to me and she went, don't think I've heard you like gasp out loud before, because I thought it was pretty well done, especially with it being Jimmy who was the one who kind of pulled the trigger in the end. I wasn't expecting that side of things, because yes, he's been needled, but it's always, I think there's been an assumption that it would be Jay who would be the one who would finally go full circle and go back to that really cool storyline that they had, back in the pandemic era. And they could still go that direction. But I think what they've done here is they've actually opened it up massively, because people now will be like, okay, so he's got his 1,000-day reign, but it's lonely at the top, because who's he going to have next to him now? And yeah, he gets his flowers, but why does that matter anymore? Because he's not got his cousins with him, and will Solo stick around now, or like whose side is he going to be on? And at the end of the day, he is the Usos' brother, so there's that question lingering. Jay's facial expressions were great again, as they were when Sami did it as well. So it's kind of one of those things of going like, is he missing his opportunity to actually be the one who does it, or is he legitimately kind of upset, or so there's a lot of questions, but it now becomes very self-contained between themselves, rather than across the tag teams the championships aren't involved anymore, and like his belts aren't really kind of involved in anyone else, so it's all become very much a family thing. And it does feel like we're moving into the end game for that kind of like whole bloodline thing, but there's still legs left in it. There's still a lot of questions to be answered, which is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you. I think in a watch along, I was like, come on, Jay, you do it as well. But then I'm like, coming out of it, like as you say, it's kind of like opens up new avenues, really, of like, oh, okay. And they've done this a few times with this, like it was like when Sami did it, it was like, oh, okay, like Jay's gonna team up with, oh no, he's not, and then like it kind of took us in a different direction. Then even going back to the very beginning, we've touched on it quite a bit tonight, but with in a Hell in a Cell, and first Jimmy was against him, then he was with him, then Jay was against him and he was with him. So it's kind of been all over the place in that sense, but it's kind of continually opened us up to new avenues within the storyline, and I think that's what's exciting about this as well. Also exciting is that we're leading towards Money in the Bank, and just about an hour ago, me and Lucas were saying, what's going to happen with Roman at Money in the Bank, because he's meant to be there. Are we going to get Bloodline versus Bloodline at Money in the Bank? Like, it's going to be, SmackDown's going to tell us a lot, I think, but I was thinking, who's the challenger? Like, someone's got to face him at Money in the Bank. So now I'm like, oh no, the titles are kind of in the background. This is, again, like you say, Andy, it's a family thing as well. What about you, Lucas? Do you feel like it was the right time to pull the trigger, or do you think they should have kind of held off a little bit more?
No, I think it was the right time. I think, obviously, we've seen the Saudi shows become like bigger, like really big deals. Obviously, they started off as these kind of, upmarket house shows in stadiums, but now they are like big events to rival kind of the big five in that respect. Yeah. So, and I think even looking forward as to what they've got to come, they've already mentioned it, that the next kind of record that Reigns will pass is 1,027 days of Pedro Morales, which is literally, that's even before Money in the Bank anyway.
Yeah.
And to go beyond that, I think you're then getting into like Hogan's territory, which, weird to say, is only like, I think someone worked it out that it's like next May, I think he'd do that. It then break Hogan's epic 4-year run with the belt. But I think if not now, I don't know when they'd do it in the future, if that makes sense. Like, while I wasn't thinking that this would happen on this pay-per-view going into it, I'm still very much going, well, would they have waited till Money in the Bank to do it in England longer, because Money in the Bank's already got like the Money in the Bank matches and all that kind of stuff. Or they waited to like SummerSlam to do it potentially, but is that like too far? Because I mean, they've kind of exhausted Bloodline versus Owens and Zayn now. Like, it's it's been that same feud now since September, October last year, and we've seen multiple matches involving every single member of that. We need to, they've added like Matt Riddle lately, I've seen, to make someone different be in the match with them, but it's all kind of the same. So I think personally, yeah, it was probably the right choice to do so. And I think what Trish is kind of captivating with these pay-per-views is he's got a talking point coming out of each one, good, bad, or indifferent. I think the Bloodline, though, the one thing I will say is it's becoming kind of a trademark of theirs now, of this kind of, the match is kind of stopping for a lot of stuff to happen. Happened obviously at WrestleMania. It's happened at it happened last month. Like, it's happening like every single show. And I think there needs to come a point where just let them have a match that isn't involving, like, the match was stopped for a very long time. And obviously so the Usos come out and then dump a table on Kevin Owens and then super kick everyone had their facial expressions amazing, but it's like, well, the match is still going on. And it's happening quite often with this story. But I guess it's because Roman obviously only wrestles on these big premium events.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was the right time to do it.
Something else I found quite interesting about is, you know, Sami Zayn's night, which I think was a great thing for many reasons. But that final shot, or one of the final shots at least, of Sami Zayn holding up the titles and basically saying to Roman, like, nah, man. You know, Roman's looking up like almost like teary, thinking, like looking, you know, quite a regretful face that Roman had on as well, of like, what is, like, my world's falling apart. And I think it was a great kind of image to see Sami the one. It wasn't directly Sami, of course, it was the Usos that did it, but it was almost like a told you so sort of thing, you know. So I do think this is the end of KO and Sami as far as the bloodline goes, and I think it should be. But yeah, where do you see those guys going, Andy? Where do you see Kevin and Sami going now?
Are you going to come up with a new nickname there?
Oh yeah, Cammy.
Just before I touch on that, one of the things I think is really cool, by the way, and it's quite clever on WWE's behalf, is now they can embroil Roman in this kind of like family feud, and the belts, as you said, become secondary. He can clock up a lot more days without actually having to defend it. But on the other flip side of that, it also allows the new heavyweight championship to kind of be the championship that does get defended. So it's quite clever that they build that up while kind of sneakily going, well, Roman is there and he's doing his thing, but like they're not bothered about the belts. It's more of a blood like feud at this point. So yeah, fair play to them, because it's I think it's quite a clever way of getting around like some more days under his belt and possibly go through to at least Mania and then make that decision closer to the time. But because he could go against Jimmy, then he could go against Jay, and then he could go against Solo, and none of them would be bothered about it. So like, and then you've got like what 4, 5, 6 months worth of ammo there. So it's but in terms of Sami and KO, I think they just now need to go actually be a proper tag team in terms of like go prove that they are a good tag team, and then you know the inevitable fallout will happen at some point where one of them stabs the other one in the back. You know, the history is always going to repeat itself with those two. So I think for now, go put on some like absolute bangers with some tag teams that deserve it. Like you've got people like Street Profits that will always put on a good match with them. And then there's a few other tag teams that have kind of been starting to build up. I think Chad Gable is amazing, deserves more, probably deserves a singles run. But even there, I would love to see Alpha Academy go after them as well for a little bit, and even maybe have what they call pretty deadly as well. Like eventually there's like that kind of like nice
Imperium.
Imperium as well, because it would be cool to have those guys have like all the titles on them as well, that are available to them. So lots of other tag teams just go put on some great matches, I think, for me.
That's a good shout, actually. Imperium taking all the titles is, you know, we've talked about before. Did a stream on Andy's channel a few days ago as well last week. If you haven't seen it already, check him out. Andy Spoors, Wrestling Royalty, where we talked about Undisputed Era, and we talked about their stable really that were kind of dripped in gold for a period as well. So I'm always a fan of that kind of thing as well. But yeah, I think Sami and Kevin, in my opinion, have got to do exactly what you said. They've got to go on and just be a tag team for a bit before the inaugural turn. I'd like to see it be Kevin turn on Sami, because I think Sami is just too kind of white hot as a babyface at the moment to do anything else, and he's only really starting to breathe now as a babyface. So it probably should go that way, but even that kind of doesn't have to be anytime soon, does it? So they could lose the titles and kind of just be mates for a bit, and then all of a sudden someone gets an opportunity while the other one doesn't, and then there we go. It's all a sort of kind of hot mess from there. But let's touch on kind of some of the other big talking points really from the show itself. One thing that I think seemed like a bit of a foregone conclusion was the Gunther versus Mustafa Ali match. Again, another example of, you know, just a nice feel-good moment really in Saudi Arabia between these two. It wasn't the match that I was hoping it would be, as far as, like, I always felt like Ali was going to win, but I was hoping that they'd trick me at some point where Ali might just do it. But saying that, it was still a very good match. I still really enjoyed this. And as we talked about earlier on, Lucas, it's a hard thing to follow now. Anytime you get someone in the ring with Gunther, there's a formula in some ways, you know, and you've kind of got to live up to it. And I don't think it was the same sort of thing we saw against Drew and Sheamus or anything else, but it was still a very good match. What did you think of this overall? And of course, the decision to keep the title on Gunther?
Yeah, like as a tier on thing, I think, you know, one of the reigns, I link this now with the Raw Women's match, because they're both championship matches I had on the show. I think one of these long reigns had to end, and I think the correct one ended in the sense of Asuka beating Bianca Belair. That was a record which obviously, she surpassed the year, she beat the record, that's fine. And it definitely needed to move on because Bianca Belair was starting to get negative crowd reactions. But I think in terms of Gunther, nice possible way, Ali was literally main event, as in the TV show. Followed
yeah, not the main event, one of the 3 main events.
yeah, we missed one where there was Roman Reigns versus Ali. But yeah, I think to go from that to then beating Gunther, I think would be a stretch, particularly after the WrestleMania match. I think that is such a high bar for any wrestler to kind of come off of, beating Sheamus and Drew McIntyre, at WrestleMania for that belt. I think that's put him as that thing. And I don't know, do they go to the record? I'm not too sure. The record, I think it's coming up soon. I think it's weird that record stayed the thing for so long, the Honky Tonk Man's record stayed for so long. You think they would have changed it, a few times, but it probably does. He probably does break it, I'm guessing. I'm not totally against that, but I'm not also kind of hoping they do. That record I quite like. I think how much they're trying to move the records into the 21st century. I do think some stuff should just remain. I don't know. It's nice to have old throwbacks, but it just seemed like Gunther would be the person to do it. But I think it was the right decision to get the belt on him and the right decision to take the belt off of Bianca Belair. So I think if those match results had swapped over, I think I'd feel negatively about them both because I don't think Bianca Belair should continue as champion because where else was there for her to go? And then I don't also think that Ali was ready to kind of beat Gunther. So this was absolutely the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, you make some good points there about the history as well. I think I'm okay about Honky Tonk Man's one being over with if you keep, and I think they will keep, because it's one thing beating Pedro Morales and Hulk Hogan, it's another thing to beat Bruno Sammartino. So just like in football, where I get annoyed when people act like football began in 92, I am very much about the history books. And if these people get forgotten, I've forgotten how to speak, then it's kind of, at least you keep them alive in the history books, So I think
it's a tricky one with Honky Tonk Man because he had that reign at an era which just isn't very is bold, as JR would call it, bowling shoe ugly. Just it's very hard to watch matches from that reign.
Yeah,
where continuously losing matches by count out and DQ.
Yeah,
but on purpose to extend that reign, and the whole purpose was to build up that match against the Warrior at SummerSlam, where he loses in 30 seconds.
Yeah,
after that amazing that long 16-month reign, but he was always that villain who. He's always just got away, and I think nowadays it's lost to modern fans. But it'd be nice, obviously, if it still is there as the record, because then people can go back and go, okay, I want to watch something different. But Gunther, obviously, he's just a complete other beast in this kind of thing, and but definitely is the right choice for the spot he's in at the moment. And it would be that's why I would be open to if the tag belts were to come over to Imperium, it could make that faction, because they do. The only thing I do kind of fear is that the other two members are becoming just the fall guys, and they're taking quite a few defeats on television, which I know it's hard because there's other stuff involved, but I think that Imperium, to build them up, it could help them having the tag belts as part of that. And maybe that is the next step. I think that, to me, would be the next logical best step to do with the Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn thing.
That's always the risk, ain't it? To be like, well, he can't lose, so his friends can, and he kind of has because his friends have, So it's always a thing they kind of book in, kind of as a kind of substitute for the main guy not actually losing, but there's still a little bit of jeopardy within his emotions. I guess he's annoyed about that, but he hasn't actually lost himself. Andy, what did you think about the IC title match? Was there ever a time you thought Ali was going to do it? And then following up from that, Asuka getting that as well. We'll touch on the Asuka in just a moment. But yeah, first of all, your thoughts on Ali.
Yeah, I think what you said was bang on. I don't think there was ever that moment of real jeopardy where you thought, hey, he's gonna actually do it, or he's got a half a shot here. Just a really close finish, close fall would have been nice. I was just reading a stat that apparently no one's held the Intercontinental belt for a full year since 1988. So he's already kind of on the way to that as well. And I think he beats the record for Honky Tonk in about September time this year. So he's not too far away from it. The interesting thing is with this new belt, because I think part of the reason why he's held it so long was because obviously Roman was part-time and the IC belt kind of became the main belt that was defended on TV on SmackDown. But now he's on Raw and they've got this new belt that's kind of being like, you defend it all the time. It's a fighting champion and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't necessarily need it anymore. You can kind of, that might be the one that ends up having to be moved around a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see which direction they go. But I think the cool thing for Gunther is at the moment he's just winning matches like because he's so good and so dominant. He's not had to resort to any kind of cheap tactics of defending it. So he's still got that like little run towards the end where he's clinging on desperately to keep hold of his belt, where he can get the Imperium guys involved, or he can like kind of get intentionally disqualified, etc. So I think there's definitely legs in it yet. There's still plenty of people who, you know, he can have a great match with, and it kind of puts him in the spotlight. But for Ali, I think I'm kind of disappointed in the way they kind of hot shotted him to where he got. I think he was on the end of such a like kind of losing streak. Kind of wanting to see him, like they do it every so often where they build someone up after they've had such a bad losing streak, and then they kind of go, now he's getting a win. He can't, you know, he gets over with the crowd, etc. And then he kind of finally has that moment. They didn't do that with him. He kind of went from nothing to everything within about the space of 2 weeks, which is a bit odd. And he's changed his personality. He was this, hey, I'm a really kind of like overly happy, positive guy. And then all of a sudden it was just no, actually, I'm just going back to Saudi and I'm going to get the title. It just felt a bit flat, and he never really kind of like shone that he could be an IC title holder after Gunther. So disappointing. But the Asuka one, I know you wanted to move on to that. As Lucas said, I think it was the right one of the title reigns to end tonight. And I think they did it in the right way as well. They needed to give Asuka a little bit of something extra in her character. And I thought that was a cool little twist where she kind of like missed with the first mist, but then sprayed her fingers so the referee couldn't see. And like, you know, that was very dastardly heel. The only thing I hope now is build her as a heel. Like, don't let her kind of flip flop and kind of be in a bit of a grey area. Make her a heel. If you have Bianca coming out with kids who are on, you know, like for a dance group in LA, and she's kind of being John Cena, then make her a babyface, make us sympathize with her. You know, at the end of the day, she's been cheated out of a title that she's held for ages. So now's your chance to like reinforce that she is the person you're supposed to be rooting for. But she is also very good, and Asuka's going to cheat. So they have to define those lines now. And also, for the love of God, please make it the SmackDown Championship, or just get rid of SmackDown in it. It's not a Raw Championship anymore. You've got to rename it. It's got to be rechristened.
Yeah, we talked about it quite a bit on a watch along as well, about this kind of how it was a good chance to do it, being it was Night of Champions, but it wasn't to be. But maybe we'll see something going on as far as changing up the titles in the future. But I'd agree with you there. I think Asuka needs to be defined as a heel, because the very real risk with Asuka is that she ends up being the way she has when she's held titles before. She's been in this position before, and that title, and I hate saying it, but the one that she holds seems to be one that's not as important as the other. So I'm scared that's going to be the case here. But they've really played into her character in this one. So I'm a bit more optimistic about it this time. The call and the need for Bianca to turn heel was kind of calmed down for me now as well, because the idea was that she was the babyface and the champion. And now she's lost one of those things, which was the title rather than the babyface persona. So I think she can, as you said, Andy, really kind of amp up this kind of I was screwed, and we can feel sympathetic, and I think it's kind of bought us some time as a babyface. I don't think we need the heel turn anymore because we got the loss. So as long as Asuka's a strong heel, Bianca can be a strong babyface to go against it. Lucas, what are you thinking, mate? Do you think we are going to fall into the same pattern, unfortunately, with Asuka, where she is the secondary champion and her character work ends up being kind of, you know, forgotten about? Or are we going to get a strong heel persona that is going to be able to match up against the kind of unjustified loser in Bianca Belair?
No, yeah, I think a bit of both. I think that with Money in the Bank coming up, it then depends what they decide to do with this championship. Obviously, do they decide that the winner Oh, winner of the Money in the Bank. Remember that they've gone through both phases. Remember they had like the winner of the Money in the Bank could face whichever world champion. Then it was like only on their brand. But then obviously with the titles being on the wrong brands. How have they done this? With the titles obviously being on the wrong brands as they are, can then someone who wins Money in the Bank just challenge whatever one they want? I don't know. But yeah, I think ultimately that with Asuka being the newest champion, and now you've got we now got 2 heel champions, so okay, women, haven't you? So does that mean the Money in the Bank winner will be a babyface to take it off one of the villains? That might be where they go.
Yeah.
Because Rhea Ripley's definitely a villain, and then you've definitely got a villain brewing in Asuka. I think obviously because they will do a rematch of this. I'm assuming, because the whole way it ended, and obviously Bianca will have to be the babyface going into that because you can't be cheated out of something and then be the babyface. But I think if you flip like I'll introduce the next women's match now because it's only a minute long. So it's only worth a minute. Wow, that is. Interesting.
I think I put that graphic up nearly as long as the match was. But,
but yeah, look, it was interesting seeing like Bianca Belair last month against Io Sky, and this month 2 really, really good matches. Actually, I think the Io Sky one was much better. This one, definitely the latter half of this, there was so much in terms of what we're talking about moving forward. Like we've established Asuka as a villain, we've established that the Mist has multiple uses now, which would be interesting. That might be interesting too, like seeing how she uses this Mist, because obviously now people are aware that it can be kind of put on her hands and wiped in their face and all that kind of stuff. Or people going against Asuka on television now going to be a bit more. Oh, actually, it's not just being sprayed with it. It's also kind of being put in my face. Wherever she's going to be. And I hope they let her go really nasty with it, because the one thing sadly which Asuka is going to be unable to do as well as the other women is the promo side of things, which, as we know, WWE like people to do these long 10-15 minute promos for these and contract signings and all this kind of stuff, but hopefully they just let her be the person to go, look, I'm just like the badass, I'm just the villain basically. And even if they do a contract signing, just have her come out and spray mist. That's all you need to do. You don't need to have this whole in broken English her having to talk like a whole WWE promo. Just have her do that, do what she does best really. But yeah, the SmackDown Women's match though, I was in Natalya on my birthday as well.
Was it a birthday? I didn't know
that. We didn't get much of Natalya.
No.
I did think it was weird though, because when someone else was Trish did a sharpshooter, didn't she, in her match against Becky Lynch? And I was like, that's a bit weird because Natalya's on the show, and then you figured out, well, to be fair, it wasn't going to be seen by her, so maybe fellow Canadian Trish. But I mean, SmackDown Women's, this just seemed like it was a very much by the numbers kind of thing. I'm guessing with the show, they've done this quite a few times now, where they are bookending the show with very long matches. So the first match on this card went 20 minutes. The last match also went over 20 minutes, like 26, 27 minutes, I think. And then you had another 15-minute match, I believe, in the Asuka and Bianca Belair. So I guess if that's their format now, essentially, of one match kind of has to be really short, because I'm sure, Andy, you're now used to it, the adverts and the hype and the packages. It's just eating into this time. Gone are the days of the 3-hour pay-per-views of 10 matches. Now, I think I pointed out to you, Scott, it was an hour for 2 matches, over an hour, including all the hype videos and packages.
Yeah.
So it just seems that's what we're going to get now. We're going to get a couple of shorter matches in between. But definitely, I think big angles have come from both of those, though, still, even in the 1 minute, 10 seconds of the SmackDown Women's match, because you've got the fact that now they're clearly establishing Rhea as she's a dominant champion. And, they're going down that road already to perhaps be setting her up for another one of these record-breaking reigns, potentially, because she's been able to dispatch. But then saying that, the competition hasn't been the strongest. Obviously, since Charlotte Flair, she's only faced, obviously, Zelina Vega, hometown hero back in Puerto Rico, and then now this month, Natalya. And you'd have to hope they would build up bigger opponents for her as the months go on. There's a lot of women, obviously, on the roster, do you know what I mean? But it's the case of it does seem like establishing her as this dominant villain for now.
I think it's always inevitable that one of the 4 horsewomen get back into the title frame, and I think it's more likely now on Rhea's side, which I think is a bit of a concern, because although she's a heel, people love her. So I think it's a bit of a risky move where we could be going there. Strange to see the match go so short. Part of me thinks shouldn't have had it. But then I'm like, you know what, pacing of the show, a bit of padding and whatever else, and it gives kind of somewhat a prestige to the title being on the show as well, and kind of ticking those boxes where we didn't have the world WWE title, and we didn't have a Universal, and we didn't have the women's tag, and we didn't have the US. So it's kind of well, at least we had the SmackDown women's. What are you thinking, Andy, as far as the way this match went about? Are you happy? Well, I doubt anyone's happy with the length of it, but are you kind of still understanding that they at least still did it, or do you think it was kind of a pointless match?
I'm going to be completely honest, right? I went upstairs to say goodnight to my daughter, and by
You
the time
missed it all.
finished, like, I'm not. That's not even like a joke. I legitimately went up, and I didn't even think I was up there that long. I was like, oh, all right. I mean, I presumed that was going to. I think no one in their right mind ever thought Natalya was going to win, but like, she just seems to be the person they can call upon if they need someone just to put in a position of like, oh, you know, she's Natalya. She's got a great pedigree in terms of like her wrestling background, her heritage, you know, a lineage or whatever. So it's kind of like how can we make Rhea look legit? Just absolutely just bulldozer her within you know, a minute or whatever, and it does the job. Like, it sucks for Natalya, but that's the position that she's in within the company, and I think she's probably happy with it. She's going to go on and be a coach, isn't she? Like, she already kind of does a lot of coaching with TJ and stuff like that. So I don't think she'll be, you know, crying herself to sleep in Saudi tonight. I think she's more than happy to have like a nice meal on her birthday, you know, or whatever, and in a nice, you know, well, I say a nice part of the world. I've not been myself, so but you know what I mean. It's like in foreign climes, but it definitely establishes Rhea, you know, as just so dominant. I did read something though that someone was, and I hadn't really thought about it before, where someone was mentioning that what's Rhea actually done for the women's roster, because if anything, the bigger moments for her come when she's like face to face with like a male superstar, and people are like, "Oh, okay, like she's gonna like face off against Solo, or she's gonna face off against whoever." And then she has matches where she destroyed Zelina in front of her like friends and family. She, you know, like, yes, it went slightly long, but and then you've got the likes of the match tonight, like, didn't do anything for Natalya, didn't really do anything for anyone. And, you know, she's busy kind of messing on with Dom or the rest of Judgment Day, and doesn't really put much back into the women's roster. So that's an interesting argument I hadn't really thought about. And I can kind of see their point. But again, similar to Roman, whoever beats her, like, gets, you know, slingshot to superstardom because she's been built so dominant. Then whoever beats her does go on to be a star in their own right. So it'll be interesting to see when they do pull that, and will they let her go long, or maybe they instead, she's the one that the Money in the Bank cashes in on because you can catch her out every now and again, sort of thing. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I think some great points there, especially that, you know, what she, and this is why I thought her when the Rumble was weird, and me and Lucas talked about this earlier on the watch along as well, but because everything about her was great because of Judgment Day, not because of her within the women's division. But another good point that you made is that kind of, at least this kind of is another kind of notch really to kind of add to her title reign, that already, like, if she weren't on the show, she would have only had, maybe, I don't know, one defense, but of course only one PLE defense. So already 2 months in, we're like, oh, she's dominant. She's only had the title for 2 months. So if it weren't for this match, maybe that's all this was for. Laura says they did Natalya dirty. It does feel like that from the outside, but as Andy said, you know, this is kind of her role at the moment. So, and it makes sense. None of us are surprised she lost. I guess we're just all surprised at the kind of the manner of it and how quick it was, which did feel at the time something to save time for. And then other things within the night didn't feel like that was even necessary. So maybe the whole idea was to kind of just beat her up and really look strong. And Natalya goes off and does something else. But hey, it is what it is. WWE went for 3 women's matches in a row. We're doing it in a different order, but we're going to do the same thing here by talking about Becky Lynch versus Trish Stratus. And we mentioned it on the build-up that this is kind of a dream match. You know, this is a WrestleMania-worthy match. I thought it was a very good match. I thought the ending was amazing. I loved the way they executed that with Zoe Stark coming out from underneath the ring, hitting that impressive move so quickly. Becky probably doesn't think the same because she come out with a bloody nose, but to then hide, and it wasn't your typical referee gets knocked down, which we would see later on the night. It's a very clever way to do it, I thought, and I was really hoping that when she come back out from under the ring, that she would align herself with Trish, and that looks like what we're going forward. And I think that's a good spot as well. And we've been saying, Lucas, haven't we, for months, that we need grudge matches in the women's division that are nothing to do with the title, and that's what we've got here. I was so pleased when she turned heel, because finally it wasn't like I'm the legend. It was I'm the legend, but in a different way, you know. So I know some people haven't been too thrilled with some of her mic skills or anything like that, but I think she's kind of done as well as she can for the era she's come from. And I don't mean that in a kind of belittling way or anything like that. I've said it throughout the night that she's kind of from an era where she didn't get an opportunity to kind of flex that muscle, and she's finally getting it now. So there are going to be a few kind of teething problems. She hasn't been around for too long, so I don't have those expectations that I think maybe newer fans are looking at, going, "You don't sound like Becky Lynch on the mic," because she was never going to sound like that. And I think she's done a good job, because I'm still looking at her as Trish Stratus 2002, you know, so I'm still going, man, that was a good promo. So you know, so I don't mean that in a kind of you know, a belittling way or anything like that. I do think she's actually done quite well in a heel run, and I'm looking forward now, because as I said on the watch along, this is a nice thread between three generations. We've got the Attitude Era star who's coming back to kind of get a new chance at this new opportunity that these stars are getting. We've got the four horsewoman who's there, who is the kind of she's not past it, don't get me wrong, but it's now about Rhea and Bianca and those kind of people, and now we've got Zoe stepping up there and kind of threading into this storyline as well. So I think this is going to continue to go. But what I'm most happy about is that we're seeing Trish align herself with a newcomer, not just of this generation in Becky, but the future. So really pleased to see that. And again, I think the execution of it was fantastic. Swing it around to you, Lucas. What did you think about the actual way this is you know, kind of all wrapped up at the end of that match?
Yeah, I think that this is the right thing to do. Like, I think WWE had a very weird period of using the legend / Hall of Famers, and obviously, I will state, to be fair, there are now too many Hall of Famers. It's getting quite weird. Like, every single segment, it's like WWE Hall of Famer Triple H is out.
Yeah.
We've got WWE Hall of Famer Trish Stratus defending her friend WWE Hall of Famer Lita. Yeah. But anyway, I think the way that this was done, like, is the right decision. I think that, particularly, we spoke about this a lot with the women before, but obviously a lot of the women were put into retirement very early on in their careers, and they went off to do other stuff, and that's obviously great. You know, no disrespect to any woman who gave it a go in the Attitude Era, gave it a go in the early 2000s, then went, you know what, same for me, or I wanted to do something else, and they left, and they didn't get these lengthy careers. It's unheard of for women to be in the WWE for a long time. But now we're in the era where it's going to happen. Like, there's people who have actually left the business to have children and come back, you know, to wrestle, and as well as other people on the roster who are mothers, like Tamina, she's a mother, and she obviously wrestles for the WWE, not obviously at the same level as Becky Lynch, but, you know, she's still part of the company. And I think that to give these ladies a chance to kind of come back, and if they can still go, like, that's the right thing to do, and not just like once a year, you know. And that's why I was happy when Lita was able to come back too, because she's another woman. Because it's just the fact that when, you know, that I've said it a few times to you before, Scott, haven't I? I said, you know, the fact that she had her match in Saudi last year against Becky Lynch, and then a month later was just wrestling on the Indies in Mexico. It's like, well, just do that in WWE. Like, just sign her
up.
She's good at the wrestling. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, like, there are some botches that happen here and there. You know, she maybe needs to cut the moonsault down to, like, you know, like an Undertaker dive once a year kind of thing, because it's getting a bit thing. But she's quite good at the wrestling, so keep her doing the wrestling, I say. You know, and end of the day, like, time will catch up on everyone. But if she can still do it, just have her still do it. And I think the same with Trish. Like, she obviously can still do it. Obviously not to the same level as, like, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but that's just normal. But if she's able to pass things down to the newer generation while working with the current generation, I think that's exactly where you want to be. Because again, 2 years, 3 years from now, you know, like, any time really, someone like Trish, she's able to basically book herself essentially and say, look, I've got enough money, I don't need to do this anymore. I don't fancy getting punched in the face. I don't fancy doing this anymore. But, like, you may as well do it, have her do it, but with helping people who are from this generation and the previous generation and the new generation coming up. And she's a perfect person to get the rub on. And maybe this leads to, obviously, her mentoring Stark, and potentially even having a match with Stark down the line as well. Do you know what I mean?
Good point. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm definitely a fan of this. Definitely a fan of this.
You're right. I didn't even think of that as, you know, inevitable turn or kind of rise up again. I mean, we're booking very far in advance here. We don't know how long Trish is sticking around, but as Dan said on the build-up, you know, she's been drafted, so that's kind of a good indicator. Andy, what are you thinking, mate, as far as this new way that we seem to be using Hall of Famers and especially this kind of use of a former NXT star? Of course, I know you're a big fan of NXT, so you must be pleased to be seeing Zoe in this role.
I am, but I'm not a fan of Zoe Stark, so it's a bit.
Catch-22.
What I do like is my biggest issue that I've had with Zoe Stark is that I don't think she's ever had much of a personality or a character, and this potentially addresses that and gives her something to actually get her teeth into for the first time. She kind of had it when she had her injury, didn't she? She came back and then came when she was in a tag team with Io. At the time was Shirai, but obviously now it's Io Sky. She came back and she had a bit of a harder edge about her and kind of went in that direction. But I guess like the easy way to build this is to say, you know, when I was a little girl, I was watching Trish Stratus do her thing, and like, you know, like how dare you disrespect her in the way that you have done? And you know, I think it's only right that I helped her when she needed it. I thought it was pretty slick. Her finishing move it looks cool. Like it is a good finisher because it's almost a the GTS, isn't it? But it kind of rotates a little bit longer. And she did really well because she kind of caught her and threw her back in like one motion, which was like a nice touch. But I couldn't tell if Becky's nose was busted open from that or from the bulldog off the rope from Trish, because she took like 2 facial moves in one go. So it actually, to be fair, it's one of those things where you went, if you were going to take a knee to the face followed by hitting your face off the mat, your nose should basically explode. So, you know, I know this wasn't supposed to, but it looked legit. So fair play to them on that. And I guess for this one, you don't even need to have Trish around for a little while because she won this feud, or she won that match and kind of wins the feud by proxy. And now you can have Becky just go against Zoe, and you don't even need Trish involved if you don't want her to. She can go do whatever she wants to, but if she wants to be involved, then she just holds that victory over Becky's head. And then I guess you can have that tag match if Lita comes back as well. Then there's that kind of like route to go down. It's cool to see Trish because I think she's kept herself in such good shape. You know, she does her yoga and stuff, but she can still go. Like, you get some of the legends who come back and they can like do a couple of their moves and stuff, and that's it. She's putting on like a good, you know, what was it, about 7, 8, 9 minute match? That's not an easy thing to do. But it also speaks volumes of Becky. I think Becky's just such a professional that she can like help them through and make sure the pace suits what it's supposed to look like. So I think it's a great observation that they've got kind of 3 generations, or as it were, with the NXT like graduate. The NXT has just come up, and then one of the women who you'd argue started the revolution in its entirety as well. So yeah, really cool to see those 3 interact. And my hope now is that I can change my mind on Zoe, and she this is the start of something cool for her on the main roster.
Yeah, I think some great points there, especially about the fact that Trish could kind of step back, still kind of be within, you know, main rostery, but like have a week off every now and then by Zoe to kind of taking her space, and then her coming in and again leading into that potential, you know, bringing Lita back, because you think eventually SummerSlam's got to have a big one. So yeah, a tag match between them, that you know, that doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility. Another feud that I think is going to be continuing a little bit longer is Brock Lesnar, Cody Rhodes, and leading into this, you know, as it was with Backlash, it felt like there was a clear choice for winner. It had to be Cody. This time around, I feel like it had to be Brock. And I know when we were watching it live, Lucas, you kind of felt like the Kimura spot went on a bit too long. Pretty much was about 90% of the match in hindsight when you look back on it. That's a bit of a frustration because it was still kind of a short match, but only kind of prolonged by those 2 kind of spots. I think they went about it the right way. It was the right decision. And I kind of get this temptation that WWE get a lot to do things twice, like go back to that move. But that works better in a match that's 15, 20 minutes long, I feel. So when it takes up such a big chunk of the match, I feel like it's a little bit of a miss. But again, at the end of the day, I think this match went the way it needed to go, and I understand what they did and the Kimura and the arm and all that kind of stuff makes it. I wouldn't have done the injury angle again, but here we are. We've done it. At least if you can do it correctly. This does continue the feud, and as I said earlier on the predictions episode a few days ago, Rob says he thinks Cody might be, kind of cost the Money in the Bank by Brock. I think still a possibility here, and then to prolong that onto SummerSlam as well. But now that we're kind of an hour out of that match, Lucas, what are you thinking as far as the way Brock and Cody went down?
Yeah, I just wish Monday Night Raw last week didn't exist, because it just, for me, that's what ruined the match. It ruined the match for me, having that big angle on Raw where he has the barrel thrown at his arm. He's in the Kimura. He's put in the Kimura, and Triple H, who the entire feud between Triple H and Brock Lesnar existed around the Kimura and around how it was breaking people's arms and it was dangerous. And so now you got a situation a few years later down the line where this Kimura, from a legitimate UFC fighter, former UFC champion, is now basically like, this was the thing. Like, I remember when he got it in on Shawn Michaels. He broke his arm. That was it. Shawn Michaels was gone. For months, same with Triple H, gone for several months. It's a broken arm, and it just, because they've done it for real with Cody this time last year, obviously at Hell in a Cell, obviously against Seth, it just feels like it's just a bit of an overreach. I think in the match as well, I think because they went back to it twice, and it was long both times he was in the move. I just felt, for me, it was just going a bit unbelievable. But in saying that, the live crowd seemed to really eat this up. The reaction, obviously, when Cody finally got to the ropes the first time was very, very strong. And when he hit that crossroads, and as much as it's very hard to kind of do Lesnar, kind of think you're going to beat Lesnar, because a finisher is nothing to him. Do you know what I mean? He ate a breakfast, so it's the case. But it was still like a decent-ish near fall for, again, only a 9-minute match, which is kind of weird. But ultimately, the right person won, and like we said on the watch along, this is about setting up their inevitable rubber match, most likely at SummerSlam. I don't see it being further than that. I think that it will make sense for it. They skip it at Money in the Bank, and then they come back to it, for SummerSlam, and it gets that blow off match. And again, it keeps Cody. They're doing a lot of things now to kind of sort everything out in a weird way, where, like you said, they're going to have the Universal Champion, the Undisputed Universal Championship, kind of all locked in with the Bloodline feud, so that won't be defended for a little bit. Then you've got, obviously, the fact that you've got both the IC and the US belts that are happy to be the kind of solid upper mid card, and because obviously they do 50-50 booking with the women, we've got 2 women's world champions, and then we've also got this Cody and Brock feud, which is able to kind of delay these challenges for them, because otherwise, if they won't fake each other, you have to imagine Brock Lesnar realistically could just say to Seth, "Well, I want to be world champion now." That's how you get a title match in WWE, isn't it? You win Money in the Bank, or you just beat Brock Lesnar and say, "I want." But and the same with Cody. He would obviously be challenging for this World Heavyweight Championship, but they've got a distraction with it, and they're setting a lot of stuff up, aren't they? I guess. And maybe it's to prolong this Bloodline thing, along with prolonging Cody away from the Bloodline, to probably bring back to it. I might ask Alex, actually, because do you think, me and Scott kind of think they are going to go back to the Cody and Roman, but do you think they are? Or was the Mania thing was that it?
I wish I knew the answer, to be honest.
If you think.
Yeah.
There's two different narratives. There's a narrative of Cody had his match at Mania, and that was always the plan. There was never a plan for him to be the champion. It was just done, and that's that. And now we're moving on to, like you say, there's loads of matches with Roman and the Bloodline, isn't there? There's a good year's worth of work there, really, especially as part-time. Or is it just being done to build Cody back up to get in that same spot again next year?
Yeah, I have a feeling it's the latter. It keeps Roman busy. It keeps them away from each other. They've done that in the sense of having them on different sides of the draft as well. So, the biggest criticism people were kind of throwing around was saying that Cody hadn't earned it. Like there wasn't much jeopardy. He hadn't overcome the odds. He entered the Royal Rumble at number 30 against a guy who had been in there at number 1, and he was babyface. It didn't make sense. And then he kind of went through and he even, beat Solo Sikoa's unbeaten run and like took that off of him and that kind of side of things. And I got it to a degree because it's kind of one of those things, and we'll never know how much the torn pec, played a factor into what they were going to do with him in a kind of like grander scheme of things in that time period. But I firmly believe it's all right. You don't think he's earned it? He's going to earn it now, and he's going to have to kind of go round the long way. And even the minute that Roman won at WrestleMania, I was like, that's what they're going to do with him. They're going to go. He'll come out. He'll try and like get a rematch or whatever, but then someone will interrupt, and lo and behold, it was Brock. And I still think the same will happen again. He'll beat Brock in the third match that I'm sure will come, and then someone else will get in his way, and there'll always be like someone in his way until they're ready, and it probably won't be until WrestleMania season next year, and then I think they'll go down that route there, and then you have that rematch at WrestleMania 40, and you finally give him his moment there. But maybe they don't. Maybe they do go in a different direction, and then they swerve.
Cody Rhodes become the only person to lose the same person, the same championship.
2 years in a row.
There was a couple of things, by the way, I just wanted to point out, and like I had a lot of thoughts on this match because there was a few things. 1986, the Four Horsemen broke Dusty Rhodes' arm. And it was a big angle. So I wonder if they're kind of going down that route of like they're going to do little snippets of Dusty's career and roll it into Cody's story as well. And they'll just kind of replicate, because we see it on NXT where Shawn Michaels is rolling some of his like past matches and angles that he's done into NXT matches. So I wonder if it's like a little like a Easter egg for those fans who know kind of the Rhodes history and stuff. So maybe it's that, but it does, what do you do now? Because you can't just come out the next night and not have a cast on. So, like, how long do they have him in the cast for? And like, how long does that go on? Like, is it in Fast and Furious where The Rock's had his arm broken? He just kind of like cracks it open. Yeah, he's like, he can't do that. That's like, we do suspend our disbelief in wrestling, but not to that extent. It will be, it's going to get torn apart on social media. But the Kimura lock for me, and being it for so long, like. I look at it from the perspective that Brock is a legitimate UFC fighter in his past. Like he is, an MMA fighter. Yeah. So like, to be fair, if you watch an MMA match, like Brock Lesnar probably would do that if he had the opportunity. He's go, actually, I'm just going to hold you in this because you can't do anything about it. And then eventually you're either going to have to like do something special or give up. So I think it was more of a kind of nod to his MMA background than anything, and just kind of, well, I've already done the damage. I'm just going to kind of capitalize on it. But it doesn't make for a great wrestling match. But the whole way through, Brock is shouting, fight me, not wrestle me, because he's not a great wrestler. He's just a good fighter. So I think they made him just look like a good submission or like kind of brawler, whereas like Cody was looking for his opportunities. So, and at the end of the day, we all know why they did it. They had to put plausible deniability in for Cody to say, I had an injury, that's why I lost that match. I didn't really stand a chance, but at least I had the bottle to go in with a broken arm against Brock Lesnar. So it still makes him strong-ish in defeat. It's just a bit of an odd way to go about it. As you say, he's a legitimate UFC fighter. You didn't need last week breaking his arm. He could have just...
The worst part of the feud. Honestly, worst part. The thing is, if I just feel they had done the same match, but hadn't done that angle, I've been down for it, because there would have been jeopardy and realistic jeopardy of, okay, like he can maybe overcome these odds, but it's like he'd gone into the match with like the arm already injured, and then locked in that move, and it's having almost no effect, and he escapes that move, and the second time he's in it, like in my opinion, he should have tapped. Well, I think he should have tapped, but I guess it's one of those where they're trying to keep him like still quite strong. And obviously it's against his whole character. But it's interesting you say that about the Rhodes stuff, actually, because there's lots of stuff. Like we know Triple H is a massive fan of Dusty Rhodes. Like, we know Triple H, the bishop of the NWA and that era. That's Triple H kind of gold mine for ideas and for inspiration. So it'd be interesting if other stuff does come up from that from that. And I do imagine that Cody will be a big part of War Games this year for that reason. I think obviously War Games was Dusty's. It was Dusty's thing, wasn't it? Like it was, back in the day. And I think that'll be an integral part to the story, and which is where we might see, like you're saying, he even when he gets another obstacle past Brock, I'm guessing it would then lead into this War Games thing, potentially Survivor Series later on in the year.
Yeah. Go ahead, mate.
Sorry, just going to ask the one thing I don't understand, because I don't understand about the physics behind it. If your arm is in a cast and you're putting a Kimura like where it's going, supposedly trying to break the arm that's already broken, is the cast not effectively supporting you? I'm really confused as to what would happen there, because it's supported enough that you couldn't break it again, surely.
Yeah, I've never had a cast on, but that's what I assume it is. But I guess that much pressure is going to be too much for it. But
yeah, I'm assuming they don't do casts on the basis that you're going to go out and have a wrestling match. 2 days later against one of the best to ever do it.
I mean, it did look like a cool cast. It wasn't one of those ones where you go into like your local
everyone
NHS
signed it.
Yeah. It's like quite a slick, like kind of black, like fabric thing.
On the penis, right? The rope.
Yeah. All polka dots. A bit more rats, but yeah, it's I think it's an interesting one with the Cody situation. Like you say, it does have these kind of hallmarks of Dusty and stuff like that, which he's going to be all up for, and so is Triple H, as we mentioned earlier on. We've got Rob here joining us as yet Untitled on his other podcast, of course. Usos less and go. Great stream, guys. Thanks, Rob, for joining us, mate. Pity you couldn't join us live, but I appreciate you got a lot going on at the moment. So hopefully we'll have Rob back for another stream soon. But yeah, if you join us live and you want to hear us talk about the Usos and stuff like that, we did start the stream with that. So feel free to hop back on that if you are live with us at the moment. But yeah, just kind of final thoughts on the Cody thing. As I said, it's kind of, the Dusty thing, you can see parallels, and it probably is something like that. And the good thing about it is we've talked about how the Bloodline have kind of, and the titles really have got this kind of grace period now of kind of being wrapped up and not needing to be defended because of the new title and also because of the storyline they're in. But Cody also is seemingly being kept away from Roman, but now there's a chance to keep him away from Brock, as we say. Like, Brock could cost him, which adds to the kind of feud as well. And also, usually when you're being kept away for SummerSlam or something like that, you need to go into like a very temporary program where he faces like Elias for 3 weeks. He doesn't need to do that. He can focus on something that is individual and isn't about kind of a feud or a grudge. It is about kind of a goal, which is the Money in the Bank. So these multi-man matches are kind of a good way to take people out of storylines temporarily to then be able to stretch those out and bring them back after it as well. So I think it's a good time. They've stumbled across something quite good here, but knowing them on Monday Night Raw, Cody and Brock are going to be at each other or something like that, and Cody doesn't even go for the Money in the Bank, but we'll see how that goes anyway. What we're going to do now is we're going to move into creating a new main event. It's the main event it should have been, and we're putting the new title, somewhat new, maybe not, depending on how they see the legacy of the original Big Gold. But of course, AJ Styles versus Seth Rollins opens the show. I've touched on this kind of a million times already. I know the rumors are, just for anyone that's joined us late, that Seth had to rush off because of other commitments. If that is the case, fair enough. You did what you had to do. And I think the Becky Lynch match being on second is something that's kind of made people think there is weight in that claim. But for me, I'm not sure, because of these rumors that went around about them not being kind of too keen on Seth because of Hollywood, which I don't buy. I think WWE probably fed that to the dirt sheets, if anything, because they want to create this kind of feeling that he might not win it, because it's been a clear, I mean, when they announced the title, I think everyone went, oh yeah, Seth's probably winning that, maybe Finn or maybe AJ, maybe Bobby, but like Seth's been the top of everyone's list. So, and being against the SmackDown guy, I think it was just a way to kind of add that to it. But anyway, if Seth had to go off to prior engagements, fair enough. If he didn't and they actually booked it as the first thing, gutted. But at the same time, I said earlier on, the only way I can see around it is if the Bloodline thing had an actual big shocking moment, and it had one of the biggest shocking moments of the year. So I kind of get it for that. It is one of the biggest storylines, but it's frustrating that it's opened the show. And again, I've touched on this a million times tonight already, so forgive me for going on, but anyone that hasn't joined us, that's kind of where we are with this match. But the match itself, really enjoyed it. I did go into this thinking that might create more of a chip on the shoulder. This might, create a kind of match of the year candidate. It wasn't a match of the year candidate for me. Definitely was up there as far as possible for match of the night. It was a very good match, solid match. They did really well, worked really well together, as you would imagine. And I think the right person won in Seth Rollins. It still doesn't, I've got to be honest, I felt great watching it and being live. We don't usually do watch-alongs on this channel. It's more of our buddies over at Give Me a Whole Year doing things like that. We usually kind of do the build-ups and the recaps and the other kind of content around the events. But watch-alongs, we try and do them for the Saudi shows because they're at a reasonable time for us. So it felt good to be part of history and watching it live on the channel. But at the same time, I've come out of it thinking, all right, it's not really the title though, is it? So let's swing this one round to Andy first time with this one. What did you think of the match overall, mate? And what are your thoughts coming out of it as far as what's next for the World Heavyweight Championship?
Yeah, I think when you had Seth Rollins versus AJ Styles, you knew it was going to be at least a sort of like going in. It's going to be at least a 3.5-star match, if not better. And I think they kind of delivered exactly what I thought they would. There's a nice little wrinkle with the knee injury in there, just to kind of like plant that seed of doubt as to whether he could get it done, especially when he went for that first stomp and kind of crumpled on top of AJ.
Very weird though, one that went to his hand though. Do you remember that one where he kind of
AJ
didn't move? We weren't sure, were we, Lucas, whether or not that was meant to be something else, but a very strange one.
So I thought that the match itself was probably what most people would expect. I don't think it was your 5-star match. I think they could do better. I think it's very difficult. That I've heard a few interviews with some of the superstars when they've said about wrestling out there. Apparently, it's very hot, very dry, and you get very sweaty very quickly. So you start kind of like slipping in moves and things like that, and you then have to slow it down and make sure you kind of like plant yourself and things like that. So it makes it very difficult to have a 5-star match in the sense of it doesn't look quite as quick and like as fluid as it normally would do if it was on like a WrestleMania or in an arena and things like that. So just a kind of a thought process there. But yeah, it's I guess in terms of like having it on first, as you said, it's probably more to do with the bloodline than anything, because if you put that bloodline on first, it doesn't have the same impact of going off there with Roman sitting lamenting his life choices. So like you can't have that really. That if once they booked that match, it would kind of had to go on last. I don't think I'd buy him going on first because he's got other commitments. I think it's just purely because of the position on the card. And if you're not going on last, you're going to go on first. Like that's the position that you want. Triple H has always had this kind of mantra, and he had it in NXT where they even had the kind of slogan which was "Follow that, mother truckers." So like what I mean is like if you're not on the main event, you want to make the main event the first one, and they kind of did that. And I think they kind of set the table up like nice and early that this is going to be a decent match, and they delivered. Now I just kind of want to go, on Monday, is Seth going to be still selling a knee injury? So does someone come out and say, hey, you're supposed to be a fighting champion, give me a match straight away, and he's a very quick first champion? Or does it write him out so he does have commitments that he's got to go filming and say, actually, he's got an injury? But then you open yourself up to this whole thing of like, you are supposed to be a fighting champion and you're not here on the first night. But for me, I'm just thinking like, who do I want to see him go against now? And for me, like, I would love to see him have an actual full feud with Nakamura, because I think Nakamura versus Rollins is just gold for me.
Yeah. So interesting points about Rollins and what happens next. Like I say, whether or not he's going to be a fighting champion. Just going to quickly get to some of Rob's comments before I swing around to you, Lucas. Says Natty, much like you, and he blinked and he missed it. I mean, you had kind of other things going on, but he just simply blinked and missed the whole thing. Quickest match happened at Saudi, asked. I'm not sure if it is, but I don't remember one being much shorter, so you might be right on that. Also says, been great seeing Andy on the show, been checking out his streams. Content is fantastic. A bit of praise for you there, Andy. So good time to tell us what you do and where we can find you, mate.
Yeah, so I do have my own YouTube channel, which if you just search my name, it's just Andy Spoors. You'll find it's Wrestling Royalty. And I like to do kind of like feature videos. So we talk about a few different things rather than kind of doing strict previews or reviews and things like that. I like to kind of change things up a little bit and do like sort of tournaments, etc. And you will see the likes of Scott and the guys from Gimme Hill, have been on as well. Always open for people to be on the channel. If you want to see my my writing, you can find that over on rushonrock.com. I love feature writing. It's my passion, is telling like long form stories, which is what I believe wrestling is about. So I'd like to delve into the stories behind it. And you normally get some, what I like to think is decent NXT content, because there's still a lot of good things going on there and I like to cover it. So if that's your thing, go check it out on rushonrock.com.
Perfect. Yeah, and I echo what Rob said there as well. Really great to have Andy on the show, and of course, really great to see his content growing as well. Yeah, I'm big fan of that. Not just because I've been on the channel, but also because he covers some pretty interesting topics. But let's get back to another interesting topic now with Lucas's take on again this kind of one of many main events. What I found quite interesting, Lucas, was the dynamic that they had between being two baby faces. I think it's easier to do when it's a tournament. You don't have to have like a grudge and whatever else. It's kind of just for a goal that they both want. I think they played the role quite well between the two of them. What did you think?
Yeah, like I think, they, even though Rollins obviously had been away because he's been filming, I think that his presentation was much better going in, though. I think that Styles, obviously, he had an injury, didn't he, at the tail end of last year, returned only recently with the OC, and he hasn't had that time. And even when he was on the roster, like kind of, regularly, he hasn't really been at the forefront of anything for a long time. So I think Rollins and everyone kind of just felt Rollins had deserved it, because he went through kind of the pandemic era with, first the visionary gimmick, and he had Authors of Pain with him at one point, and he had Buddy Murphy, and that all went, went to the wall. And then he did the whole eye for an eye stuff against Mysterio. He had to go through some rubbish, like in the past couple of, creatively. And, it's just the fact that he then, we mentioned it a few times before, obviously he had the weird DQ match, the weird DQ against Roman, at the Rumble, I think last year or the year before, I can't remember which year it was in now. But he felt like the winner, like from the get-go. And I definitely did feel in this match, and to your point, Andy, about the humidity in like Saudi Arabia and obviously how they struggle, I definitely feel in this match there was definitely more conscious placement of certain things. Don't get me wrong, like Styles and Rollins are probably two of the smoothest wrestlers to ever do it. Like Styles, I've been a fan of since day dot, since WW days, and then going through to TNA, and he is one of the smoothest guys out there in terms of moves. Now he does things, but obviously in this heat, in this climate, there was some bits which didn't quite flow as nicely they would have done if it was, like you say, like a WrestleMania or like a Raw or anything like that. But I think it was a very good match. But I'm still left, like Scott, really feeling a bit, like it's not the main belt. You can't have a championship and have 2.5 years of Roman Reigns and that belt being so important, and him merging the other belt that was the big belt as well into it, then have a massive match at Mania against Cody Rhodes, and then tell me this new belt now is on that level. Like it's just not. I think the way we were talking about earlier, obviously they're going to shift the Universal Undisputed Championship, which not undisputed, I guess, because there's another world champion. To the sides, he can do feuds with basically the Bloodline and stuff. They have to make sure this belt is the forefront, the most important thing on Monday Night Raw for the time being. And if Rollins isn't available, that kind of begs the question: did he have to win then? Like, could he just Styles is available? Couldn't you have just had Styles win it and be that fighting champion then, and then have Rollins win it when he comes back? Because there was a moment, like especially when a knee injury happened, actually, I'm thinking, maybe they're going to get to Styles. Because let's be real, like Styles is another one. Like we talk about, like Natalya, like his spot now isn't really going to ever be to be the main guy again. Like he is. It's hard. You can't talk about Styles without saying phenomenal. And I'm playing right into their hands, I'm cut of the merch money. But he is just a phenomenal performer. And I think it's a case of, but he knows his spot isn't now to have the main event, 12-month title reigns. But if it is a case of Seth isn't going to be available, he's filming for a little bit, it's one of those things where they put themselves in the corner. Because, if Seth doesn't defend that championship or say he wants to defend that championship on Raw on Monday, but Styles could have done that, then just put it on Styles, have Styles do that. Styles, again, another one who's capable of having amazing matches still. And then to bring it back, maybe for SummerSlam or even Money in the Bank, depending on how quickly Seth gets out the commitments, and then have Seth beat him down the line, But I guess we shall really see this, obviously, on Raw. If we do see a pre-tape promo from Rollins to set up his next feud, or they do the typical, just the match gets announced, I guess, for the next pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And then Rollins will just show up and do the match.
So I think it'd be wild for them to kind of not do a full-time thing if something like that is going on. So, but the other thing is you've got people vying to get in Money in the Bank with these qualifiers. So who therefore deserves a title match without going through that? So someone's going to have to like wrong him or something. Like a heel's going to have to do something to him on Monday Night Raw to justify being in that position, because Seth's so angry he gives him a title shot sort of thing. Otherwise, how comes you have to compete in a tournament but I don't, sort of,
Look, I must admit, like, give Trish credit, like something from tonight, my final kind of thought I'd say. And the reason I moved to the position, by the way, is because my iPad was about to die.
No worries.
That's why I'm like this. But I think it has made Raw kind of, it's piqued my interest. I might need to give it a little view, see kind of what direction we get nudged into. I'll be honest, I probably won't watch it live. I'll just watch some clips in the morning. That's more than it's got.
But that's progress, Lucas. That's progress.
Because I do know what direction they're going in with this new belt and with Money in the Bank qualifiers. Like, how are they going to work? Because obviously, are they going to be like a tournament, or is they going to be like the beat the clock challenge? I used to love that, by the way.
Yeah,
absolutely used to love beat the clock challenge. But or they do the even like doing, they can do it, singles matches or three ways or battle royal spot, they do all this kind of stuff, don't they? So it's very interesting seeing who qualifies and how many as well. Like, are there going to be 6 wrestlers, 8, 10? Because it's a very messy match, Money in the Bank. And obviously within in the UK as well, like, it's a case of, okay, will we, on SmackDown particularly, are they going to address the Drew McIntyre thing? Is he going to be part of it? Is he not going to be part of it? Because you'll have to imagine that he was meant to be. You think he was meant to be at one point.
Yeah, it's wild to think we haven't seen him since WrestleMania. So it'd be interesting to see, like, if he doesn't show up in the next week or so in these qualifiers, or kind of to get into a grudge match or something like that, it's going to be really kind of interesting to see. But like you say, a lot to look forward to on Raw. Also, again, I mentioned it again, the Trish and Zoe Stark thing as well, I think is an interesting thing. So yeah, there's quite a few things, as you say, Triple H has done here kind of to make me go, oh, okay, I wonder where that goes. And that's all you want from wrestling, really, is to kind of be excited about the next show as well. Andy, mate, before we wrap up, any kind of final thoughts on Night of Champions?
I thought it was a solid show. I will point out that I made my predictions and I got every single match right. So I find it disappointing when you do that, because it's kind of like maybe it was a bit more predictable than I would have liked it to be. But because we got the kind of the big twist at the end, that was nice to see and kind of did keep things fresh. But as you say, it's a good show to get people tuning in, because I think there's bigger things coming down the line. If I could change anything, I probably would have just liked to have added one more match in, to be honest, and kind of cut down on the advertising break, or the big kind of long video packages they have to do because of Peacock's layout for the Americans. So I thought it served its purpose pretty well. And then all I'm excited now is we are on the road to the O2 now.
Yeah.
Exciting stuff, exactly that. So stick with us on this channel, but also check out Andy's. Of course, we're gonna have to do extensive coverage about Money in the Bank and kind of getting ourselves in the mood for that as well. Again, going to be here in London, so we'll be meeting up and kind of getting down and dirty. And kind of diving into wrestling and kind of getting all the content out there for you guys as well. It's been a real pleasure to kind of meet up with guys like Andy. Of course, we saw Dom and Sam on the channel earlier on as well. So it'd be great to kind of hook up with them. Before we get out of here, I'll mention the predictions table, of course, with Dan, Rob, myself, and Lucas. Last year, of course, Dan is the reigning defending champion. We're doing WrestleMania to WrestleMania as a season. After Backlash, this is what it looked like. And you talked about clean sweep just there, Andy. I got a clean sweep at Backlash. I'm massively surprised to say I got the same again. I don't think that's ever happened before, and I think it deserves a bonus point, but we never actually discussed that, so I can't take it. I haven't updated the graphic yet, but Dan has reliably informed me that I'm now, I'll bring the old one up just to kind of reference to again. I'm now on 15. Dan is now on 12. Lucas, you're on 10, and Rob is on 8. And of course, a big part of that is that we went for bonus points on the Usos costing the Bloodline, which did happen. But Rob double bonus pointed it, which is a very strange thing. We've never done that before. That Roman was specifically going to be the one to take the pin, which wasn't the case. So of course, he lost a point for that as well. But that's where we stand on the table at the moment. Really do thank everyone that's joined us throughout the night, whether it be on the build-up show, the watch along, or this on the instant reaction. Again, check out their channels: Wrestling Royalty with Andy Spoors, Give Me a Whole Year in WrestleSphere with with Dom and Sam earlier on. And of course, we've had our very own Lucas and Dan joining us on the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel here tonight as well. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone that's joined us, everyone that's commented live throughout the streams tonight, or everyone that's watching on demand and wants to kind of say their piece. We're looking forward to hear what you say in the future as well. I've been Scott. He's been Lucas. That one down there has been Andy. We'll see you next time.
Welcome to the Rebellious Noise Pro Wrestling channel. On this channel, we bring you some great content from inside and outside of the squared circle. We will go through and offer some in-depth analysis of the biggest events of the year, as well as bringing you exclusive interviews with some of the industry's biggest names. There will also be live show reviews, in-depth features, and podcasts. So make sure you give that subscribe button a slam so you don't miss any of the action.